That's how it's easy to fall away from the gospel and to start thinking that we have it all under control. But it's a lie. We've never been forced to do this. Why would I need any of those things when my life is good? Now, as long as everything is good, church is good, everybody's getting along, life is good, then all is well. Not sure what I need the gospel for or this armor for. And when all hell breaks loose, we don't know what to do. We throw up our hands and we run back to the weak and beggarly elements. And whoever goes back, forget about the knowledge of truth. We forget about Jesus. We start failing to see our own sinfulness. We start looking at ourselves more than we are. We forget about God. Jesus is demoted and hypocrites are promoted. That's what happens to us. That's what's happening to them. Verse 9, he says, why do you desire to be again in bondage? You know the freedom of Christ. Why do you keep running back to the world to find your needs? You know misery loves company. Why are you going there? Why are you going to beg from a beggar? You're just going to wear each other out. Verse 10 gives us one of those, he gives us an example of one of those weak and beggarly elements of the world. He says, you observe days, months, seasons, and years. And it kind of seems like this little verse sticking out of nowhere, but he's simply trying to give an example of these things that they were now trying to observe or put into effect in their life, thinking that that was the answer. They had started to follow and celebrate all of these special days or holy days or holidays that the Jews in Israel were commanded to observe under the law of Moses. There were like 9 different festivals that they had to go to and participate in, and we're not going to list all that. But it's kind of like today, every time I turn around, I hear some new national day, right, of something or a month of something. Don't get me started on that. But imagine if we had to follow all of those days. Imagine being forced to follow all of those days to be right with God. Now, Paul is not talking about, it's wrong for believers to observe a special holiday. He's not talking about that. But you have to be aware of your motives of why you celebrate it. You see, the problem is not observing some holiday. The problem is observing the special days not to honor God, but to be honored by Him. And you're like, what are you talking about? Well, let me explain. That's what we do today. We go to church, or when we serve Him, isn't it a natural tendency to say what? Look at me. Look at me. I'm at church, God. I'm doing this, God. Now, if you won't admit that you want others to notice you, and I know we all do, and I know you won't admit that, and that's okay. But you might as well admit that you want God to notice you, because that's why we do this stuff. Look, God, I've been to church 3 weeks in a row. That's got to be worth something. I know you got a book up there. Write it down. Yeah. God, I know you see me putting this money in the box, right? I heard someone said if I put money in this box, you're going to give it back to me more times. Yeah, that's what we do, isn't it? That's what Paul's saying. He goes, you're going back. You're more worried about the days, times, months, and years. You're trying to get God to honor you by you honoring Him or something like that. That's not how it works. When you do this, when you live your life like this, when you think that you do something gets credit with God, that somehow if I just do this thing that I'll get special recognition, that God will start to like me, that He may forgive me of all the junk that I've done, you have made yourself a slave to sin. You've made yourself a slave to the works that you're trying to do to make God happy, instead of just accepting Him and His love and His grace that He already tells you about. Paul's saying, I can't believe you would go back to do this again, or we even want to do this. So he's sounding frustrating. And then he goes in to make this very personal in verse 11. He says, I'm afraid for you, lest I have labored for you in vain. He's afraid that all the energy that he's done, that he's given them, that he's poured into them, it was for nothing if they have lost the idea of Jesus. It was in vain, it said. It could have been in vain. In verse 12, brethren, I urge you to become like me, for I became like you. Let's read 12 through 16. You have not injured me at all. You know that because of a physical infirmity, I preached the gospel to you at the first. In my trial, which was in my flesh, you didn't despise it or reject it, but you received me as a messenger, an angel, or even as Jesus. But where's the blessing then that you enjoyed? I bear witness you would have plucked your own eyes out and given them to me. Have I made you an enemy? Have I become your enemy? Because now I tell you the truth. So here's his personal plea, and he starts by calling them brothers. And he tells us that he believes in what he told us earlier, that there is no difference within Christ between people. He says, I'm like you and you're like me. I'm not a better Jew. You're not a better Roman. I'm not better than a slave. I'm not male. I'm not better than a female. You remember all of those? That's what he's saying. We're the same here. You haven't injured me. There's no difference. And I don't hold anything personally against you. Just remember the gospel. In verse 13, he gives this strange little statement about preaching because of his physical infirmity, and we have no idea what that is. There's no book, and this letter doesn't tell us, and we can only speculate. Maybe it was his eyes. Maybe he couldn't see. Maybe he had these big, I don't know, scary-looking eyes. I don't know. But he said whatever it was, it didn't stop him. It didn't stop him from preaching, and it didn't stop them from listening. They knew what he was talking about when he wrote it. When they read it, they're like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I don't know. You know, it's just like today, people often hide illness because of fear of appearance. Paul didn't. They didn't treat him any different. Sometimes people think illness is a punishment of God or something, but they knew better. That's not how the Galatians treated Paul. It says they received him as if he was an angel or a messenger. They even received him like he was Jesus. They knew he wasn't Jesus, but they received the message as if Jesus was preaching it to them. In verse 15, he says, so what happened? Where's the blessing that you enjoyed? What happened? You would have gouged out your own eyes and given to me. What happened to that? Now you want to go back to something else. He wants to know what changed between their first time and the moment now they're rejecting the gospel. Why would you go from receiving Paul's message like he's Jesus to disbelieving him and thinking he's some kind of enemy? Why are you calling me an enemy? Verse 17, he turns our focus back to the false teachers. He says, they zealously court you, but for no good. Yes, they want to exclude you that you may be zealous for them. Here's some facts for you. They diligently come after you. That's what they do. They seem to not give up. The world is persistent, and that persistence makes them look genuine, doesn't it? When someone tells you something over and over and over, don't you start to believe it eventually? If the world comes to you with lies over and over and over, if every TV show and every music and every song and everything you see says one thing, eventually we start to believe it. They zealously court you. They come after you with smiles and handshakes, and it seems good. But he says it's not good. Anyone trying to sway you from Christ, anything in our life that gets our focus off of Jesus is not good. Their motives are not pure. They do not hold the truth. What they have is not good for the people. Just like the best salesman has the biggest smile, right? Just like the devil comes dressed in his Sunday best. Paul is trying to get us to see the tactics of the false teachers who are lying to the Galatians. He says, yes, they want to exclude you. They want to peel you off and make you their own. They want you to be zealous for who? Do y'all remember? What does it say? What does it say in verse 17? May be zealous for who? For them. If I can make you want to be like me, guess who you're not wanting to be like? Jesus. If I can pull you away from the truth and I can get you to start worshiping me, start paying attention to me, you're not paying attention to Jesus. The goal of these people or any other false teacher is to alienate you from Jesus, from the true gospel, and turn your focus on them. They want to be the hero of the story, not Jesus. I hope one day I leave and y'all forget my name, but I hope you don't forget Jesus. Right? They want people to listen to them. They want people to give money to them. They want the people to honor them and not Jesus. Verse 18, he says, it's good to be zealous for good things, and not just while I'm there, right? He's jumping around, but he says, it's good to be zealous. Zealous means devoted. It means enthusiastic, diligent, eager. And Paul all knows too well that being zealous for the wrong thing is bad, because before his conversion, that's what he did. He tracked down Christians and killed them. He was zealous for God. He says, but there's a difference in what you're zealous for. So be careful what you're zealous about. Make sure that it's a good thing. And don't change your focus by determining who's standing there with you. In 19 and 20, he closes up this little section. He says, my little children, for whom I labor in birth again until Christ is formed in you. I would like to be present with you now and to change my tone, for I have doubts about you. Have you ever gotten a text message or email or letter and you just didn't know how to take it? I get them every day by y'all, by the way. I'll probably get some after church. What? There's just something missing, isn't it, in the writing? It's just very hard to send a text message or any kind of message, even in a letter. It's very hard to communicate. You never know how a message or a letter will affect the person you send it to. You just don't. There's so many variables, like their mood and if they had a good day or a bad day or if they're tired or whatever. But it's different talking face to face, isn't it? There's body language, tone, facial expressions, a whole list of stuff you can read about at college or something. But anyway, and modern people forget this, don't we? If communication is an art, and it truly is, text message is like scratching a picture on the cave wall or something, right? You don't know what it means and it's there forever. It's the lowest. And I don't even like talking on the phone because I can't see another person. So no wonder Paul is saying he wishes he could speak to the Galatians in person. He could change his voice depending on their attitude. If they saw they were listening and understanding, he could change his voice, soften his voice and influence them better, like you understand, y'all see? But if he saw that they were stubborn, right, and they weren't getting it, he might pound on the desk a little bit, and he could say, how come you're going back to the things that you know are not of Christ? He could change it just like that. Because he knows if he's too harsh, just like us sometimes, it can do more damage than good, but if it's too gentle like us sometimes, it doesn't seem to correct the problem. So he wishes he could be there to get through them so they could understand without a shadow of a doubt that he is in anguish. He is in labor. Like he says, I'm in labor like a mother going through labor again with the same child. Any volunteers? That's what he says, isn't it? That's the anguish he's in. And the purpose of this childbirth is so Christ is formed in you. That's the title of this sermon, church. Christ formed in you. If you have your Bible, underline those words. Christ formed in you. This is the heart of the gospel. This is what it's all about. The gospel is not just a story that you believe. I've said this for weeks. It's not just a story. It's not just a set of historical facts, of events, of history, of things that happened. Yes, Jesus came to earth. Yes, he died on a cross. Yes, he was put in a tomb. Yes, 3 days later, the tomb was empty. Yes, he sits at the right hand of the Father. This is our facts. These are events in history that occurred. But knowing the facts doesn't change your life. It truly doesn't. Knowing these facts won't get you into heaven. When you get to heaven, he's not going to ask you to recite the gospel. He's not going to ask you to recite some Bible verses. Just because we believe in a story of something that happened to Jesus doesn't change you, and it doesn't change anything. The devil and the demons believe in the same story, by the way. They know what happened. I don't think we're going to see them in heaven. The difference in the gospel and the Christ formed in you is knowing the story and what you do with those facts. Do you do anything with knowing the story? Do you believe in those facts? Great. But are you still trusting in the weak and beggarly elements of the world? Yeah, I believe Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I believe he came and he died and all that stuff. But I'm still worried about the world and all the things of it, like one beggar asking another. That's the way I live my life. Christ formed in you is what we're looking for here, church. Not memorizing a story and then going ahead and living like the rest of the world. Christ formed in you is when you take those historical facts and you put them to work. And you start living like you believe in those facts. You start finding out more about this God that we talk about and what he wants. This God that sent his son. What is he truly like? Get out of your imagination, because our mind doesn't work that way. We have to go to his truth. What is he truly like? What does he truly want from me? We have to find out more about the Son. Who is this Jesus? Is he just a guy that walked around and I always say, gave candy to kids or something and, no. He's just a good teacher. No. Well, he healed people. Well, he did that, but that's not why he came. We got to know more about him. We got to know more about us and who we truly are in their eyes, and not giving us too much credit and not beating ourselves too much. We have to find out what is truly going on, not what we think, not what we think they want, or what other people seem to think they want. And we start doing these things, doing what Jesus says, putting our beliefs to work, and that's called faith. Our obedience brings love, your love brings obedience, and it starts to work. John 14:15 says, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my what? Y'all remember? Commandments. If you love me, you'll do what I say. And if you do what I say, that's how I know you love me. It's a circle. You got to start. And then in verse 16, he says, and if you love me and you do my commandments, I'll pray to my Father, and he will send you the helper. The Spirit will come live in your life. God sends his very own Spirit to live inside of you forever. This is how it works. Christ formed where? Say, in me. Christ formed in me. It doesn't work by reading a book. It doesn't work by going to church. It doesn't work by any other way but by God's Spirit coming to live inside. That is his job. The Spirit has a job, and the job is not to bring attention to himself. The job is not to bring attention to you. The job is Christ formed in you. That's how it works. Things start to change inside of you. You become a new person. You become born again, free from sin, born into God's family. This is how it works. No longer under the rules and regulations. No longer trying to be good. So the question is, only you can answer, guys. Is Jesus being formed in you? Is he being formed in you? Paul has labored in anguish. Christ has told us everything. God has revealed his truth to you. Is this happening in your life? Do you see your life changing for the better, or do you see your life just the same old, same old? Is something happening? Or do you just simply believe in a story? Because there's a difference. Will you please stand this morning and bow your heads with me?